Aloha, my name is Tom. Welcome to the California Surf Museum here in Oceanside, California. We're going to take a really cool tour today, so stick around and check this out. We do have a little introduction to wave science, including up here on the monitor a live feed from CDIP, which is the Coastal Data Information Program. That is a public access website operated by Scripps Institute and the Department of Waterways and the Corps of Engineers. And they gain all their data for this website via these yellow CDIP buoys like you see right here. There's 16 of these in Southern California. There's 271 globally in U.S. waters. So you can check swell height, swell direction, time period between waves, along with surface currents and surface water temp, literally from U.S. Samoa to Sheboygan. They have these buoys every place. There's 16 in Southern California. They're denoted by the yellow dots on the chart that you see here, kind of clustered around the port of San Diego here locally. And the closest one's about a mile offshore, and that's providing us this 045 Oceanside reading. This refreshes every 15 minutes, and you can see it's showing us current swell height of about 2.3 feet, approximately 14 seconds apart. That's a pretty nice interval, actually, between waves. 187 degrees is the primary swell direction this morning, as this summary graph is showing us also. So it's coming up out of the south, which is pushing the water temp up. It's showing about a 67-degree reading out at the buoy. The red and the green are forecast models, and here's our date run. And the blue line is real time, so you can see the forecasts are real accurate, actually. They just mirror the real time. Constantly looking at swell height, and more importantly, sometimes this primary swell direction that they'll show on these, because certain beaches face certain directions. Give you an example, this time of the year, Malibu is a very famous surfing beach and faces south. So this southerly swell works very well in the Malibu area here. Our current featured exhibit is Stars, Cars, and Guitars, and this looks at the birth of the modern surf era, which occurred around 1958, lasted till 1965. So it wasn't a particularly long period, but it just rolled like a tsunami through pop culture in that period, and is still affecting modern surfing in terms of its look, its language, its customs and cultures. So it's a really fun peek at that era. Our timeline back in the corner extends to the 1800s into the modern shortboard era. We have a beautiful wave machine on display that's actually got 10 different presets in it, so you can dial up some waves and have some fun with it. We come around the corner and we'll see Bethany Hamilton's board. Probably the most famous exhibit we have. It is certainly the longest running. It's courtesy of the Hamilton family. When she was age 13, she had her arm taken off by a tiger shark on the surfboard that you see here. And she was approximately 300 yards out in the water and about 25 Hawaiian miles from the only hospital on Kauai. Due to the quick response and quick thinking of the people involved and sheer intervention, she survived that day. And the Hamiltons are very good friends of the museum, and they've allowed us to display this since 2010, since we actually moved into this facility. And if we weren't impressed enough by the stories of these pioneer men and women, we look at this look at these surfboards in amazement every day. It's so embedded in their culture, in the Hawaiians we're talking about at this point. And this is the oldest surfboard in the museum, and it's circa 1880. And it's an 11-foot long Alaya, which, as funny as it sounds, is a mid-sized board by 19th century standards, actually. It has no fin on it. The word for surfing in Hawaiian is he'enalu, which literally translates into wave sliding, which is exactly what's going to happen if you're not going straight. You wouldn't see fins till around 1933, 1934, in that era. The oldest boards at the Bishop Museum in Honolulu look very similar to this. They're a little bit cruder, but the shape was there for literally centuries as far as we know. It was not until the 20th century that surfboards seemed to change, adding a little hydrodynamics, plus the fact more people were spreading surfing around the globe. So it really took off in the 20th century. Now that's all up to the surfer, their age, the kind of waves they like to surf, and the general style. Modern shortboards are very much like riding a skateboard. Whereas a traditional longboard, you have to do more trimming and you ride the board from the center to the front of the surfboard. So it's just a whole different style and a different, it's just a different vibe, and they're both wonderful. They will change surfboards' fin configurations to meet their demands. I ride a board that's about 9.5 feet long, has a ton of flotation because it's so large. That makes them much easier to paddle, and it makes it much easier to catch waves with that kind of volume as opposed to on a tiny little short board. This one is 11 feet long, and as funny as it sounds, it's a mid-size board by 19th century standards. And it had nothing to do with your skill set. It was all about social status. So the elite or royalty were allowed to ride the longest ones. And they could be literally twice as long as this, between 16 and 22 feet long in many cases. It is so unusual to have a shark-human interaction. That's why it always makes headlines. And we're all still curious as to why someone was bitten by a great white a couple of months ago here. The conditions, it was a red tide condition over that weekend. Wonder if perhaps the shark, was not using its visual cues like it might normally. So it is just such a rare occurrence, but they certainly live in that realm. It's their ocean, and I accept that. Very curious, and many times that's why you'll see them with their fin up on the surface. They're just cruising around. They are incredibly intelligent and curious animals. Yeah. Come to the micro ocean. It's got 10 different presets in here. Let's set one up that's got the best effect. That would be the big impact tsunami. Really cool. This simulates what happens when there's tectonic movement. Takes it a moment to set itself up because it's going to drain the shoreline first, like it does when there's plate movement, and then it's going to push that water back. Not in the form of some epic Hollywood wave, but just as a surge that comes back. The gentleman's name is Michael Lambert, the genius who's responsible for this, and he's truly a wonderful guy and a friend of the museum. And it's so neat how he split the tank in half, so the back has the kind of gradual bottom rise, the kind of bathymetry we have here in Oceanside. The front of the tank has this reflective, rocky look to it, so you can see the same wave react to both different shorelines differently, which of course it will based on that bathymetry, that geography on the bottom. We have the lightest and the heaviest surfboard in the museum, easily, hands down, at 155 pounds. Eddie McBride's 1938 sleek beauty here. The museum's been around for 38 years as a nonprofit. It was founded back in 1986 in the corner of a restaurant in Encinitas. And 6 moves later, and 34 of those years have been here in the city of Oceanside. They are our partner in this building, as a matter of fact. So kudos to the city for partnering with a nonprofit surf museum, something that was unheard of back in that time period. Most of these get donated over the years. People know how passionate we are about preserving the culture and the history and chronicling it for future generations. It's so important to capture this, what is a relatively new part of California history. Surfing was introduced around 1907 in Southern California. So it's all pretty new in the whole scheme of things. I think more non-surfers than surfers in many cases, but it's easy to see for me when you see that, whether it's the woodworking or the engineering or the impact some of this early cultural influences still have today. It's an intriguing place. Yeah, it definitely is. The museum has always featured an exhibit like this entitled Making Waves. That's how it was founded all these years ago by Jane Schmaus in the corner of her restaurant. She would feature young local surfers and their trophies and jerseys, and we still get to do it. And we have a wonderful feature currently featuring the Von Wagner siblings from Carlsbad, California. Very talented surfers, but more to the point, just terrific kids, good students, good leaders. And that's the best part. Katie, if anybody's got NBC Peacock, is currently in the Olympics in Chopu, Tahiti. She's the #1 ranked female surfer in the world. Graduated last year from Coastal Academy, a high school here in Oceans. As much as we pay tribute to the history and culture of the sport, it's always exciting to pay tribute to its face and its future. John is not only a terrific artist and cartoonist, he actually has an Academy Award for achievements in technical animation for his involvement in IMAX. A long cartoon in a very iconic movie of the 70s, a surf movie entitled Five Summer Stories. And it was the first time any of us had ever seen an aerial where a surfer actually leaves the face of a wave, was in John Lamb's cartoon. And now it's very common out here to see the kids pulling off aerials all morning long. And that's his feature character on the wall is from his cartoon, and his name is Willie Make It. John and another artist named Brett Hazard not only did the walls, they did the floors. You can see it replicates rocks and sand and ocean. So. Wanted to look at the birth of California, or the birth of modern surf culture occurring in Southern California. And you can't tell the story without the movies, without the music. So we featured both of those also. There's a couple of elements came together about that time. The nationwide introduction of Gidget, the availability of cheap cars, and technology, the ability to build surfboards out of high density foam, which was perfected about the same time in the late 50s. So many of these elements came together and just provided this perfect storm. People could get to the beach, they could buy surfboards, and all of America was introduced via music and the movies to California surf culture. Every year our education committee hosts a photography contest for middle school and high school students. These are the 13 finalists. GoPro is kind enough to co-sponsor it with us, and we get nearly 300 submissions, and they're professionally judged. We have a terrific award ceremony, and their artwork gets hung in the museum for the summer. You know, it's really rare to find a jaguar, so I reached out to the Fullerton Museum Complex. They have a permanent Leo Fender gallery for those that are interested in Fender's history and their instruments, and they were kind enough to help us out with this one, actually. So there's a lot of inter-museum cooperation. Oh my gosh, one of my favorite places internationally is Costa Rica, actually. Started going there in the 1990s, and it's still one of my favorite places. It's a great travel destination. The vibe is very good in Costa Rica. The beaches are all public access in Costa Rica, and it's warm and sunny. And again, it's just a great atmosphere.
Yeah, hi, my name's Jeff Duclos. I'm president of the board of directors at the California Surf Museum. And I've been with the museum now for about 3 years. But before that, like everybody else here, surfing has been and continues to be an important part of my life. And so I feel really blessed to have the opportunity to serve this museum and to communicate with people who, and the passion that we all feel, and give them a sense of the importance, the cultural importance of surfing. And I think we do that better than any place I've ever seen. So I hope people, when they get an opportunity, if they get the opportunity to visit us here in Oceanside, make that destination number one. Duke was sort of like the ambassador, of goodwill. He traveled all around because he was an Olympic swimmer. He was this and that. And then he always brought his surfboard with him. And so he was sort of a Johnny Appleseed of surfing. He would plant that seed around the world, literally. A fishing boat that was floundering. And so he's there, he had his board on the beach, he would paddle out, he'd grab somebody, put them on the board, paddle them in, then paddle back out, and he saved all these people. And so if you look in this picture, this is the board, right? Which is this board. It's like a touchstone. To me, I just think it's just amazing that this thing is still in reasonably, but good shape. But if people look at it, it just looks like an old piece of wood.